are talking about overcoming perfectionism. And so welcome. I know that everybody who is on the Zoom with me knows who I am, but hopefully we get some people to watch on Facebook Live, maybe at the recorded one. And so for those of you who are coming upon this video and you don't know who I am, my name is Jennifer Hernandez, and I'm a registered dietitian and I'm a dietetic educator. And I'm very passionate about helping people to overcome the barriers that hold them back in life and in their careers. And I've known very many people who consider themselves to be perfectionists, including myself. And I'm happy to report that there is light at the end of the tunnel. I don't know if you all struggle with perfectionism. I'm guessing maybe you do since you're joining me tonight. And how many of you have made strides toward it? I have definitely made strides. I'm not perfect about not being perfect, right? I still want to be perfect at things. And so sometimes it's a daily struggle, but we can get over some of the difficulties that come along with being perfectionists. And I want to help everybody else to also gain a more healthy mindset. So let's talk about what is perfectionism. It can be difficult to define. I'm guessing that if you're watching this, you probably have an idea in your mind of what perfectionism is. And the pursuit of perfection in and of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, but there is a dark side that involves self-defeating thoughts and behaviors. And while being perfect is often associated with being a positive thing, Brene Brown, who you may have heard of, is a professor at the University of Houston's Graduate College of Social Work, says perfectionism is not the same thing as striving to be your best. Perfectionism is not about healthy achievement and growth. So we do want to strive for excellence. We do want to strive for the best that we can be. But when we strive for perfection, really we're striving for a totally unreachable goal. And, really, we all probably strive for perfection at some point in our lives. But to be considered a true perfectionist, there's a number of other qualities that are involved. So when we look at some examples of perfectionism, this might include spending 30 minutes on wording your text message just right, or believing that missing 2 points is a sign of failure. So I teach right now, and one of my students had to leave class early because of something at work, and she asked me if it was okay, and I told her yes, it was okay. And I took off a half of a point for participation points. Now that was like 25% of the participation grade for the day, but she lost half of a point, and she emailed me because I took off half this point, even though I had said she could leave early. And my response back to her was, I don't think this half of a point is going to impact your grade. And if it does, we'll talk about it then, right? Because it just seems like within dietetics, there are so many perfectionists, and we just always want everything, and we want all the points. And I battle this personally, and I battle this with my students. But the truth is, I wasn't detrimentally impacting her grade. Yeah, Jacqueline, right. Yeah, you agree with me. You understand, and you've probably experienced this yourself, right? Now, another sign of perfectionism is difficulty being happy for others who succeed. And that's a painful one, right? Because I've experienced that myself, where I see somebody else who is succeeding in things and it's really just like jealousy rearing its head. And I'm glad that I'm starting to overcome that. And I'm really happy for people who are succeeding in their own things, because we need to be supportive of our sisters, our fellow healthcare professionals, and really anyone else in the world. When they're succeeding, we need to be their cheerleaders and not jealous of them. Perfectionists tend to hold ourselves and others to really high standards, right? And we compare ourselves unfavorably to others and unrealistically to others. And, it's so much harder today with social media than it was 20 years ago. Because when I was in college, the only way I could compare myself to others is if I knew what their grades were. But now with social media, we see all of these pictures and things that people are doing. And in reality, almost everything is through a filter, right? Whether they're using the filter on their camera or not, people generally are only showing the good things, and they're not showing that rough day and their messy hair and their meal that failed and their child's temper tantrum, right? And the really bad day at work. So we really need to be careful if we tend toward perfectionism to not compare ourselves, especially to the things that we're seeing on social media. Another thing is focusing on the end product instead of the process. And this is so true in school. Again, I just keep going back to dietetic students because I was one and I've been working with them for years. And when we're so focused on just finishing the class or getting our RD exam eligibility or passing that test, and we're not thinking about that process of learning and really learning and growing from the journey, and that's also a sign of perfectionism. And then, of course, believing that anything less than perfect or less than an ideal outcome is not worth achieving, and therefore not doing and not starting. Okay, I am stuck on this slide. There we go. So here's another example, right? If I hadn't overcome some of my perfectionism, I would be freaking out right now, but things happen and we're just gonna go with the flow. So perfectionism is considered a personality disposition in psychological terms. Extremely high performance standards and a compulsion to strive for flawlessness are common among perfectionists. Now, when these behaviors become exaggerated, perfection can become destructive. If we set unattainable or unrealistic goals, the only possible outcome is failure. And that leads to low self-esteem and depression. And I think everybody who's on right now is a nutrition professional. And so you've probably had some experience with someone with weight loss at some point in time, right? And when we set these unachievable goals of, I want to lose 100 pounds, and then what happens? They don't achieve their goal. They probably made some really good progress, but their goal was so far out that they couldn't achieve that goal, and then they give up, right? And then they become depressed and they go back to previous habits. The same thing happens in perfectionists, even if we're not talking about weight loss, but any other goal. So according to Psychology Today, there are 3 types of perfectionism. And the first type is self-oriented. And this type of perfectionist is driven by the need to avoid personal failure by setting rigid standards for themselves, right? So they maybe have these really high goals, and then they set their own expectations so rigid and so strict that they can't deviate at all, or else something's going to go wrong. Now, the second type is other-oriented, and this type of perfectionist is overly judgmental and critical of others, and they set unrealistic expectations for other people, such as spouses, children, friends, and even coworkers. And then the last one is socially prescribed perfectionism. And this type of perfectionist believes that they can never measure up to the high standards set for them by others. So if I'm going to go back to my weight loss example, think about the girls who see these pictures in the media, and none of us can live up to that picture, right? Because even the person on the magazine cover doesn't look like the person on the magazine cover. And so that would be like a socially prescribed perfectionism. Now, if we look at our perfectionism traits, there's a number of traits, and some of them are very positive, but some of them are also negative traits. So for positive traits, perfectionists tend to be reliable, responsible, dedicated, driven, and persistent. You can count on this person, right? If you have a group project, you want the perfectionists in your group because they're the ones that are going to get the assignment done no matter what. Okay, but negative traits are the people who are perfectionistic can be critical of themselves and others, unrealistic, they may be seeking approval, and then they tend to be prone to depression and anxious. Because you see, the problem with perfectionism is that people feel like they just never measure up. The ideals that they hold themselves to, that we hold ourselves to, do not match the reality of what is really possible. And perfectionism is truly an issue when multiple areas of life become consumed by these perfectionist tendencies. Many perfectionists have crippling fears that lead to the refusal to even try anything. You guys, I was so scared to commit to doing monthly webinars because what if I failed? What if I didn't do well? Right? And that's my perfectionism. And, last time we talked about imposter phenomenon, that's my imposter phenomenon coming out. And I just had to basically just say, what if I fail? But we'll get to that in a minute. So whether there's a struggle with acceptance leading to failure or the fear of failure itself, perfectionists get stuck in this vicious cycle of failure, lowered self-esteem, depression, and then feelings of despair. And ladies, we do not want that, right? We are amazing, wonderful, powerful dietitians, and we want to get our message of good health and wellness out to the world. So what causes perfectionism? Well, there's various factors contributing to the development. And unfortunately, it typically stems from childhood as a learned behavior. So perfectionism may be encouraged by parents driving a child too hard to succeed or expressing disapproval when their child's efforts don't result in perfection. And kids who have parents who are perfectionists are much more likely to become perfectionists themselves. Now, maybe it's not the parents overtly, pushing perfection on their kids, but there may just be this overwhelming pressure to live up to achievements that can lead to perfectionistic behavior. So overpraise for accomplishments, and then that feeling of pressure to continue to achieve typically leads to perfectionism. Now, I'm pretty sure I had a very perfectionistic mom, and I didn't really feel like if I didn't succeed that I would, that they wouldn't approve of me. But I definitely would say that the fact that I did well in school made me feel like I had to continue to do well. And I can't remember if I said this last time, but I am in a PhD program. I actually did a PhD program a long time ago. Back in 2006, I started a PhD program. It was not the right program. It was not the right fit for me. But also I got really sick in my first semester and ended up dropping out with the lowest grades of my life. And so when I reapplied and restarted, at first I was not going to tell anyone, except for the handful of people that knew that I was doing this, because what if I failed, right? What if I couldn't do it? And then people started finding out, and I was like, fine, everyone can know, whatever. And there was an organization that was geared towards kids, but adults too. And the lady who was running it was a doctorate in education. And so we got to know her and we're chatting with her. And I told her that I was working on a PhD in curriculum and instruction. And she looked at me and told me, I hope you get your first B soon. And because she didn't want me to feel like I needed to continue getting A's. And I have to tell you, I am, like in my 5th semester now, and I haven't gotten a B yet. And I feel that pressure. I feel that pressure to keep getting A's. And I keep telling myself, it'll be okay, right? It'll be okay if I get a B. But I have that internal pressure. And that is just my perfectionism manifesting, where I keep getting A's and I've gotten A's so far. And I just really want to keep getting A's. All right, so this aligns really well with the next slide, which is research shows that perfectionism is highly correlated with anxiety, depression, and stress. So because of the nature of perfectionists, they are less likely to share their pain with others, right? Most people aren't going to be sitting here on a webinar, public webinar on Facebook Live saying that I have yet to get a B and I'm afraid to get a B. Because doing so shows that I'm less than perfect, right? And most perfectionists are not going to do that. But anxiety and depression can really become serious conditions resulting from perfectionism. And these conditions, when they are truly anxiety and depression, they need treatment. If they aren't treated, they can lead to relationship issues, eating disorders, which guess what? We see very often in dietetic students and dietitians, and obsessive compulsive disorder. And in some cases, unhealthy perfectionism, obsessive compulsive disorder can be linked when there's a strong need for things to be done just right. And in these cases, it's felt that if the compulsion can be carried out perfectly, that feared outcome will not take place. And obsessive compulsive disorder perfectionism may perpetuate itself and reinforce obsessions as well. Okay, so hopefully we haven't gotten to that point yet, but if you have, that's okay. We just need to find you someone who can help you work through this. Because you know what? We all probably have some degree of perfectionism, but these perfectionist behaviors and thoughts do have a dark side, or they can have a dark side. So if you're a moderate perfectionist, which I would like to think that I am at this point, we want to watch out for the following things and try to keep our perfectionism from reaching a harmful level. So a few things to watch out for. You know that your drive for perfection is hurting you, but you consider it the price that you have to pay for success. Maybe you're a full-time procrastinator. Ooh, procrastination is a big one that I have been working through. As an undergrad, I basically left everything to the last minute. I'm actually starting to feel a little stressed because I have something due tomorrow. And I have started on it, and it will be easy and it won't take me long to get done. But procrastination is a huge player, especially for people who don't like to do things if they can't do it perfectly. Then they'll procrastinate until the very last minute, and then they do it the best that they can. If you tend to be highly critical of others, that might be a sign that your perfectionism is veering to the dark side. If you do things to the extreme, or you have purely black and white thinking, you have a hard time opening up to other people. You don't want other people to see your real self, because then they might see your flaws and see that you're not as perfect as you want people to think you are. If you take everything personally, this is a huge one, especially for dietetic students. And I think you all know this because I think you've all been there already. But when you go through the process of your supervised practice or your dietetic internship, it is nonstop feedback, right? And if you can't take that feedback and that criticism, right, because you're a perfectionist, so you don't like to hear that you're not perfect, then that can be very detrimental. And then, you know, maybe you just feel like you're just never quite there, wherever there is supposed to be for you. So, you know, we've talked about the negative traits, but there's also some negative consequences. Perfectionism can reduce our overall well-being. We worry about tiny mistakes and create unnecessary stress. it can negatively impact our behavior by creating defensiveness in response to suggestions from others, right? Because perfectionists don't take criticism well. And so, then we become defensive. We talked about procrastination already, right? And waiting for the right moment. But in reality, the right moment will probably never come. And one thing that I've heard in some of my personal development training is done is better than perfect. Because when you're a perfectionist, you may not ever start or at least put out into the world something if it can't be perfect. But done is better than perfect. That means put out that imperfect social media post, put out that imperfect ad for your new business. Put out that imperfect job application, because done is better than perfect. Perfect means it will never get done. Perfectionism can lead to an all or nothing mindset that can paralyze us. So just like I said, right? If we're waiting for it to be perfect, we may never get it out there. We may never get started on whatever that dream is that we have for ourselves. We may start to have some self-loathing because we can't do anything well enough. And so then we start having these negative self-talk. It can increase our fear of failure, right? Because if we think we need to be perfect all the time, and then we work super hard so that we don't ever fail, then we become even more afraid of failing. Perfectionists can lead us to be overly critical and judgmental of others, and it can hold us back from actually excelling. What if I never started doing webinars because I'm not sure that I can do it perfectly, that I don't know how well this is going to work out? Well, if I never started, then I would never be adding value to others. And I hope that I'm here adding value to you all. And if I didn't start and I didn't add value to others and I didn't start succeeding with the things that I want to do, then I also wouldn't be helping you to excel and succeed at the things that you want to do in life. All right, so I feel like everybody probably already had a pretty good idea of perfectionism, but what are some strategies? This is what we're really here for, right? How can we overcome perfectionism? So we need to know that having high standards is okay, right? Back in my single days, I was single all the way through my 20s. And so I had people tell me that I just needed to lower my standards, okay? Having high standards is good. But when those standards start to impact our enjoyment of our life, that's when we need to start considering a change. So there's a few questions that you might want to ask yourself to see if your standards are maybe a little too high. So the first question is, do you have trouble meeting your own standards? Did you set your standards so high that they're unattainable or unachievable? The second question is, do you often feel frustrated, depressed, anxious, or angry when trying to meet your standards? Again, if your standards are so high, they can cause you more distress than good. Have you ever been told your standards are too high by someone else? I disagreed when people told me my dating standards were too high, but there are other standards in life that maybe really are too high. And then, do your standards get in the way of meeting deadlines or trusting others to help? If you cannot get things done on time because you haven't reached that level of perfection yet, or you can't ask others for help because of your standards, they might be too high. So I don't know about you all, but loading the dishwasher is one of those things, right? That I still will rearrange the dishes in the dishwasher when my husband and my daughter put dishes in. But another one is folding towels, right? So I don't know how you all fold towels. I fold it in half and then in half again, and then I fold in thirds. And one day my husband was helping and he folded in half. So they're like bigger than the nice, lovely little thirds. And I just sat there and I was like, you know what? He's helping and he was doing it, and I'm not going to refold the folded towels because they're folded. Same thing with when my daughter folds laundry. It's more wadded than folded, but who really cares, right? And that's not necessarily something that I could have done, 20 years ago. All right, so let's look at strategies and techniques for overcoming perfectionistic pitfalls and increasing enjoyment in life. And the three main areas that we're going to talk about are changing perfectionistic thinking, changing perfectionistic behaviors, and then overcoming procrastination. So perfectionists often have extremely self-critical thoughts, and this can cause us to have a difficult time seeing things through others' point of view. Additionally, perfectionists and procrastinators, but perfectionists get bogged down with the details that overshadow the big picture. So some things that we might want to think about to help us achieve a more positive thinking is be more realistic instead of idealistic. So we're going to practice repeating some affirmative statements. I'm going to read it off and then we're all going to say it together. Okay? The first one is, nobody is perfect. So say that with me. Nobody is perfect. The second one is, all I can do is my best. Okay, you ready to say it with me? All I can do is my best. Making a mistake does not mean I'm inadequate or a failure. So it might be a little tougher, but I still want you to say it out loud. Making a mistake does not mean I'm inadequate or a failure. And then finally, everyone makes mistakes. Okay? Everyone makes mistakes. So to help you look at things from a different perspective and see things from someone else's point of view, think about the following questions. How might someone else view this situation, right? So when you're bogged down in your perfectionist thinking and your negative self-talk, step back and think, how might someone else view this situation? Are there other ways to look at it? Yeah, maybe things didn't go as planned, but maybe it's still okay. What would my advice be to a friend having similar thoughts? Because you would probably not be nearly as harsh to a friend as you are to yourself. And then if you have trouble keeping the big picture in mind, think about these questions. What does it matter? What is the worst that could happen? Right? So if I was, when I was thinking about doing these monthly webinars, and I thought, well, I'm probably not going to be perfect. They're probably not going to be great. So what's the worst that could happen? No one would show up. No one would listen to me, right? Okay, so if the worst does happen, can I survive that? Sure, yeah, I can survive that. And then, will this matter tomorrow, next week, or next year? So if I've already stumbled on words, right? I've already missaid some things. Is anybody going to care next week or next year that I stumbled over a few words, right? No, not really. I don't think anyone's going to, except for maybe, the haters that someday, if people start finding out about me, might start heckling me, but oh well. So realistically, perfectionistic behaviors stem from the fear of making mistakes. And gradually and consistently facing fears is the best way to overcome these negative behaviors. So as crazy as this sounds, I want you to start purposefully making mistakes. This will help you to play with the feelings that come up. Also, try putting yourself in situations you usually avoid out of the fear that things won't work out perfectly. Okay, it's going to be uncomfortable, but the more we do it, the less uncomfortable it's going to be. Okay, so some ways that we can do this: show up 15 minutes late for something. Okay, most of us probably can't do that one. I had a college roommate, and she was the kind of person who, like, on time means on time. And her boyfriend at the time, he was the type of a person where if you're on time, you're actually late. And they had a class together, and they got there after his comfort zone, but well within hers. And he got mad and told her they were almost late. And she just looked at him and said, "There's a word for almost late, and it's on time." Okay. Um, Another thing you can try: leave a visible area of the house a little messy. Now, this one I have no problem with because our house is a mess all the time. So we always have visible areas of the house messy. Of course, now that it's well into the pandemic, very few people have seen the inside of my house in a very long time. Tell people when you're tired or any other feeling that you consider a weakness, right? Maybe you had plans, maybe you were going to do something. Just be honest. I'm too tired. My head hurts, whatever it is. Wear a piece of clothing that has a visible stain on it. Purposefully allow several uncomfortable silences to occur during lunch with a coworker. This one might not be as easy to do right now because you're probably not having lunch with coworkers, but you might be, who knows? But maybe you can find a way for that to happen. Send an email or a social media post that has a few mistakes in it. Now, I will say I haven't done that purposefully, but I have gone back when people have commented on things and realized that autocorrect or my fingers or something mistyped something and there was a mistake in it. I did go back and edit it. I didn't leave it, but I was like, oops, oh well, that was a mistake. Talk at a meeting without first rehearsing what you're going to say in your head. This would be a tough one for me. I rehearse conversations in my head all the time. And another suggestion: try a new restaurant without first researching how good it is. Okay, so it's going to take some time and it's going to take some practice to get comfortable with making mistakes, but be consistent and remember that the anxiety that you're going to feel from purposefully allowing yourself to make mistakes is very normal. But once you do it and allow yourself to be imperfect, it becomes a lot easier. Now, we've talked about procrastination. It is very frequently accompanying perfectionism, because the perfectionist mind, if you cannot do something perfectly, then it's really hard to get it started. Unfortunately, when we procrastinate, it tends to make the situation and anxiety worse. So, some things that you can do to help overcome procrastination: create a realistic schedule. Try to break things down into smaller, manageable steps. We tell patients and clients this all the time, right? Nobody's going to lose 100 pounds overnight. So what do we need to do to break that down into manageable steps? Well, we need to do the same things for ourselves in helping ourselves set a goal. Maybe you really want to get a private practice started, but you don't even know where to get started. Or you know that you can't possibly just quit your job and replace your income. Okay, that's fine, and it's true. So set manageable, reasonable goals. How much time do you have and how much time can we put forward? And then what do we need to do the small things that are going to get us where we want to go? We need to set priorities. Perfectionists very frequently have a hard time deciding where to put their energy and effort. And we need to prioritize the tasks that we want to accomplish. And oftentimes, as a perfectionist, we're going to prioritize the task that we know we can do, even if it isn't the most important thing for our end goal. So we really need to look at how we prioritize our time and our activities. And I'm going to tell you, I am not completely there. I still have times where I prioritize the easy over the important. And as we set our prioritizations, another thing to remember is that it is okay to not always give your 100%. And what we need to understand is where we need to give our 100% and where giving less than 100% is okay. And then finally, ask for help. Everyone needs help at one time or another. And there is no reason to feel guilty or feel shame about admitting that you need help with something or you're just struggling. And one place that we may need help is in terms of therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a behavior treatment that helps people to problem solve. And in this case, perfectionistic behaviors are the problem. Cognitive behavioral therapy can help you see the relationship between your beliefs, thoughts, and feelings, and the subsequent behavior patterns and actions. The process of cognitive behavioral therapy works by understanding is a person's perception of the events rather than the actual events themselves that determine how he or she will feel and act. So someone with anxiety often perceives the negative outcomes, and then those negative outcomes are only strengthened when something bad does happen. So the negative thoughts will impact those negative outcomes as well. So cognitive behavioral therapists believe that adjusting thoughts can directly influence emotions and therefore behavior. The process of cognitive behavioral therapy is an educational model, and it's used to help people unlearn negative reactions and learn new positive emotional and behavioral reactions to challenging situations. So if you have really gotten to the dark side of perfectionism and you have that depression and anxiety, cognitive behavioral therapy may be able to help you. And so you might want to seek out someone who is trained in cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. Now, in order for a session to be productive, both the individual and the therapist have to be active participants. And treatment is focused on the goals of the session rather than just sitting and talking about whatever comes to mind. Kind of sounds like how our client sessions should be as dietitians, right? Now, maybe if you are a perfectionist, you don't like the idea of going to someone and talking to them about things that you perceive as weaknesses. I totally get it, right? But this could really be a help. And it can be very anxiety producing if you don't know what to expect. So I just want to share that there are a few tools that are commonly used by cognitive behavioral therapists to help unravel these negative beliefs and transform them into positive ones. And these techniques often include journaling, challenging those negative beliefs, mindfulness, relaxation, and social, physical, and thinking exercises to make a person aware of his emotional and behavioral patterns. So cognitive behavioral therapy really is perfect for addressing these perfectionistic behaviors, especially when dealing with anxiety or compulsive disorders associated with that perfectionism. Now, we're going to talk about mindfulness because one of the more debilitating aspects of perfectionism is the constant need to judge. The judging of self, the judging of others, and the judging of every tiny detail. And mindfulness is a practice dedicated to the awareness of the present moment without judgment. So letting go of judgment may help us to let go of perfectionism. And mindful breathing techniques can be a really helpful way to get started. So here is an example of a 5-minute mindful breathing exercise. So from a comfortable seated position, you're going to close your eyes and bring attention to the present by noticing how you're feeling physically. Then you're going to bring your attention to your breath, and you're going to notice the sensation of your breath going in and out of your nostrils. As you breathe, pay attention to the rise and fall of your chest. And notice the rise and fall of your belly as well. Each time as your mind wanders away from your breath, and this will happen many times, notice where it goes and then gently bring your attention back to your breath. Start by practicing mindful breathing for 5 minutes a day, and then gradually work yourself up to 20-minute sessions. In addition to reducing those perfectionistic tendencies, there are many documented benefits of regularly practicing mindfulness. And these benefits can include reducing stress. So mindfulness produces less avoidance and improves emotional regulation, leading to better mood and better ability to handle stress. It reduces depressive symptoms. Now, we're not going to get rid of a clinical depression by mindfulness, but it can help to reduce some symptoms. It can help reduce anxiety and stress, and it can increase self-compassion. It can enhance other healthy behaviors. So if we consistently practice mindfulness, it can alter functions in our brain. Negative thinking and negative behaviors are at the core of perfectionism, and actively working to rewire the brain for more positive outlooks can be done through the regular practice of mindfulness. Now, I want to share some words of wisdom, maybe some words of comfort for you all. And there's lots of them out there, but these are just a few that I enjoy. And one is, you're imperfect and you're wired for struggle, but you are worthy of love and belonging. And that came from Brené Brown. Another one is, when you realize nothing is lacking, the whole world belongs to you. And another great one is, suffering usually relates to wanting things to be different than they are. So I want you to jot down a few of your favorite words of wisdom, and I'm going to post some of these in the chat on Facebook, on the Facebook Live. I'm going to post these so you can come back and see these later if you need to. All right, so we have discussed a ton of information today. And here are some reminders of some strategies that we can use to help overcome perfectionism. The first is to ditch negative self-talk, right? We only want to give ourselves positive words of affirmation. Next is to practice making mistakes and become comfortable with accepting yourself as a flawed person. Break up tasks into small, manageable steps and set realistic expectations to help avoid procrastination. Prioritize your important projects and things and people in life. Try to keep in mind the big picture instead of getting bogged down by all of the details. Don't compare yourself to others. Your journey is your journey, and their journey is theirs. And practice living in the moment. Now, there were several references that were used to prepare this webinar, and I will also post those in the chat for the Facebook Live if you do want to go back and look at them. And I just want to sincerely thank you for joining me tonight. I love helping people to achieve their goals and to learn how to be the best version of themselves. I wish you all the very best on your journey towards letting go of perfectionism. I am doing monthly webinars. The next one will be the first Sunday in December, and we're going to talk about building your brand. And that can mean building your brand if you have a private practice, if you want to start your own business. It could also just mean if you are trying to apply to a new job, or maybe a student who's applying to an internship, helping them to put their best self forward. So that's going to be the first Sunday night in December. I would love to have you there. Also, you can help support me by just sharing my posts, sharing my videos, and telling others about what you're learning from me.